Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo, and hello, everybody. Mike here. Welcome to another episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I'm your host this week, every week. Welcome to the show. Today is going to be fun. We are going to talk about a topic that's just kind of nostalgic. And I've got a guest on. He is a relative regular on the show. I might as well give him a partnership stake in the show. But I wanted to talk first, like we're in the midst of playoff baseball. It's so much fun. It's kind of who's going to make a name for themselves as the next legend. We will kind of see how this all unfolds. But yeah, it's just a great time to be a baseball fan. And that got me thinking about the past and thinking through the past. You always think, what was it like at the beginning? And for a lot of us in the hobby, you know, some of you guys might actually be in what I'll define and what we're going to discuss today, those formative years, those years when you get started, right? And it's hard to beat something that's so new, so fresh, like the hobby was for me back in the day, and like for my guest. But we're going to talk through that a little bit. What was our experience like? And maybe give you guys some insight to it. Let me bring them on right now. Donnie Livestream, Don Field of Dreams Cards. What's up, man?
What's up, Mike? How you doing, man?
This is, I believe, your 13th show on Golden Age of Cardboard. So
yep, I'm two behind George Diamond Sports Cards, so I'm trying to catch him.
Trying to catch him. We will do it one episode at a time. I appreciate you and your friendship in the hobby because you and I are very kindred spirits. It is interesting how we kind of surround ourselves by a lot of like-minded people in the hobby, but at the same time, I have lots of friends that collect very differently than me too, right? And you probably do as well.
Yep, absolutely. Although I have to admit, more of them are the vintage, more collect like me than don't, to be honest.
Yeah, we kind of like those guys better, don't we? No. Let me ask you, first of all, why are you wearing a Dodgers hat? You're a Pirates
Why am I wearing
fan.
a Dodgers hat? Okay, I got this hat for free.
Okay.
And I went to get a haircut today, and I just threw a hat on because I didn't shower or anything before I went and got the haircut. And we were in New York City at the MLB store, and my son bought a shirt. And because he spent like $3,000 on this darn shirt, we got a free hat. And I've got a million Pirate hats. I really want a Brooklyn Dodgers hat. It was just like, I don't know. I like blue. It's free. What the hell? So that's why I have it on today. And I like to piss Rick Oddball cards off too. So
well, I thought you were just going with at least some team that made the playoffs, the Dodgers. So
baseball's still being played?
It is. I know Pirates fans aren't used to that after October 1st, but
no, we're not. Even we drove by the stadium last night. My wife's like, "Are the Pirates playing tonight?" I'm like, "No, not until April."
Not till April. Yeah, there's a lot of. I'm happy the Rangers are in the playoffs.
You should be.
We'll see. I'm still disappointed they didn't win the division. I thought they totally choked that away, and so I'd really love to be not playing right now and waiting to find out who our next opponent is after the wild card series.
Right.
But
I'm going to ask you. This is a non-related baseball question. I don't know if you've ever known this, but Mike McCarthy, your coach,
Cowboys coach. Yeah.
His brother was my teammate in college.
Really?
Joey McCarthy. Mike's from Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, Joey passed away a couple of years ago. And Mike has held a golf outing every year for him in Pittsburgh, and I've gone to it. And he is the nicest guy.
Really?
He's just so humble, and he's just like, oh, I remember that team. You guys were pretty good. And I remember when Joey was my teammate. He's like, yeah, my brother's like the assistant kickers coach at East Kansas State, or something like that. I was like, okay, whatever, Joe. But
now he's Mike McCarthy, Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, he beat the Steelers,
and hopefully another Super Bowl champion is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, well, you have one player I like, and that's Micah Parsons, because he's a Penn State guy.
Dude, Micah is a beast.
And you had Sean Lee. He was a beast in college, too. He sat out his last year, or his junior year, during COVID. He didn't even play.
I'm so glad he didn't, because that gave him that many more snaps for us.
You're right. Absolutely.
Well,
That's cool that we're talking football.
Yeah, I mean, it is football season. I did get, last week's episode, after talking with Keating, people are craving a vintage football podcast. I just don't know who to do it. I don't know who to ask to do it, because it ain't me.
No, it's not me either. I mean, Brad 76 whatever
8671. Yeah,
he's kind of Dolphins, but then you got Ray who picked Bart and Scotty traditions. I mean, those guys seem to know a lot. There's got to be more. There's got to be a whole part of this hobby that talks about that I just don't follow.
Well, according to the feedback I got, there's a large void of a podcast / video series that talks through vintage football. And I think that's something that's probably needed in the hobby.
Terry TJ Mack collects a lot of old football too.
He does. But we're going to talk about baseball, because that's you and I's.
That's what we do.
Right. That's what we do. Okay. Formative years. If you were to think, okay, what defines what formative years are? Would you say it's like maybe your first 5 years in the hobby, first decade in the hobby? What would be kind of
for me? Boy, it's not even 10 years. It's from 1976 to 1983.
Okay.
In that period, I went from being 9 years old to 15, 16. Maybe freshman year, sophomore year of high school, and then I was done. It wasn't cool anymore. As we've all said, there were other interests, and I got off it. And for me, it's funny because everyone says, 79 back or maybe 80 back is vintage. For me, it's 83. And it's just for me, just because that's when I collected. And, when I started in 76, those cards weren't vintage. They are now. But they were. Sure. I bought those packs and opened them up. So in my mind, vintage starts at 83, or not starts, ends at 83, just because it's my formative years, like you said.
And you could easily say that was most people like to finish it either pre junk wax era or pre Fleer and Donruss coming on the scene, right? That's why that line exists there,
right?
And it can be a moving target. I think I don't know that we need to pigeonhole.
Yeah, and I was buying Fleer, and what was the other one you said? I just went blank.
Donruss,
not so much Donruss, but I bought a lot of Fleer. It's a long time ago, man.
This other small company called Donruss. I don't know. Yeah. When I think of what formative means, it's kind of this idea, I think different for every person idea of, man, this is how I learned. I cut my teeth. I made mistakes, right? Those formative years, whether it's think about your career or just mainly probably your career would be a great analogy. We all screw up. We realize later how much we didn't know. You can only really define your formative years through experience, through getting on the other side of it and looking back going, yeah, I didn't know jack diddly about anything.
Absolutely.
And maybe you can say that about your marriage. Like, man, I didn't even know how to be married those first few years. I was an idiot, and now you're at least you're an idiot now. We are all still idiots in our marriages. But the formative years for me in the hobby were starting in 81, probably through 86, 87. That's when I really cut my teeth and learned. And far from knew everything. Still don't. I'm 40 whatever years in. You're 50, almost 50 years into the hobby. Good gosh, that's crazy, right?
Yeah, almost like late 40. Yeah, 47, 40 years. Now it hasn't been consistent like yours, but I still always had a love for cards. I just didn't always collect them.
Well, I'm trying to redefine what a collector is for people, because I think it's important to say, like, after 83, did you throw your cards away?
No.
They were just in the closet, right?
Yeah, I'm going to show you some of them. I've never thrown a card away.
So you still were a collector.
Yeah.
I don't think being a collector means you have to be buying cards consistently to be a collector. Until you get,
I never thought of it that way. That
you still had them, so technically you were still collecting them.
Right. That's
And
cool.
so,
I don't have to say I ever quit.
Yes, I totally agree with that. You just say, I took a break from buying, maybe, right? That would be accurate. But to say you stopped collecting them is not true, because you still had them. If you sold them all off or gave them away or threw them away, then you would have taken a break. That's taking a break. And I think we all have those periods where we can't buy as much or whatever.
That's really interesting. I never thought of that way. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That's really cool. I'm being serious on that. That's a great way of thinking about it.
Well, once every 6 years, I have a good thought. So I just blew it on that.
At least you got that going for you.
Yeah. Okay. So during those formative years, I want to ask you some questions. We can, I think, both tell our experience with these issues, but obviously for most everybody, even if you're in your formative years now,
which there are some guys in the hobby that aren't. Yeah,
exactly. We all open packs. Yeah. Right. That's like how you start. I think that's what hooks us into the hobby, is all of us open packs. And you mentioned you started in 1976. What a great year to start opening packs.
Yep.
Was it a weekly thing for you guys? Was it you and your brothers, you and your friends? How did that work?
Yeah, so it was our friends in the neighborhood and my one brother. My three older brothers are quite a bit older than me. I mean, they were like in college when I was 9 years old. So my younger brother's only a year older than me. And I've told this story before, but I didn't collect cards. And I was riding my bicycle across the street of my neighbor's house, and I wrecked the bike, and I ended up tearing my knee up and getting 15 stitches. And the woman, I was 9 years old, across the street, whose house it was, brought me a CeeLo pack of Topps cards. I was like, wow, these are kind of cool. I remember Dave Parker was in that pack, and I wasn't a huge baseball fan. I thought Dave Parker was white.
Okay.
Sounded like a white guy's name to me, like Dave Parker. And I'm not throwing anything in the fire here. It's just as a 9-year-old thought.
Yeah.
And then when I saw that card, I was like, wow, who knew? And from there, I don't know why or how, I just fell in love with cards. And we had a store called Murphy's Mart. It's kind of like a Target today, but back in the day. And my mom would take us up there, and they were a quarter. And we'd go through the CeeLo packs looking for Pirates. We didn't care if Hank Aaron was in there, Rod Carew. We wanted Pirates. And we'd look for those cards. I don't really remember buying the wax packs. But going back to your question, I doubt it was weekly. You know, my mom kind of snuck it in. My dad was very anti spending money on things he thought was wasteful. You know, he was a Depression kid, but my mom would let us buy them. So I'm maybe twice a month, maybe more, but I don't think it was consistently every week. And then we would trade with the neighborhood kids, would flip them. And one of the cool things about my mom always snuck things in away from my dad. Like when he'd go to work, she'd take us out to get donuts and milk at this one restaurant she liked. And to this day, she's almost 90. She still loves going out to eat. But the rule was we couldn't tell our dad that she took us out. So every once in a while, he'd have a business trip, or they were in this bowling league. They'd go away, and our aunts and uncles would watch us. And my mom would slip in a pack in our suitcase to my brother and I. And we'd open up our suitcase. So I got to my aunt and uncles, and there was a pack of 1976 Topps. So, you know, it's like my mom doesn't know anything about baseball, could care less. But just, that's what moms do. They love their sons. And she knew that my brother and I loved this, and she always hooked us up. And that's a great memory I have with these cards. You know, I still have the ones I bought, at least some of them. Some might be my brother's. I don't know. They got mixed up. But, my mom is part of my formative years of card collecting, and that's kind of cool.
Where did you store your cards after you would open a pack?
Just cigar boxes. My dad smoked these cigars called Marsh Wheeling, and just stuff like that. I didn't have binders, but I knew as a 9 or 10, 11-year-old that I'm like, hold on to these cards. They're going to be worth something someday. But what people didn't tell me was they kind of have to be in decent condition.
Right.
Which fun they're not. So they're not worth anything except sentimental value.
That's sometimes the best value.
Yeah. And I pulled a couple here just to show you. Like, I know I pulled these from packs.
Cecil Cooper, 76.
And Harry
Yeah,
Rasmussen.
they look like you pulled them from a pack.
Well, it gets better.
Okay.
And actually, I like this card because this guy ended up naming himself Eric later on. Changed
Eric
his name.
Rasmussen.
But, these aren't my brother's cards. Got the D on it. Got
So
the D.
you wrote D. You wrote a D just so we could distinguish.
On every single
this
one.
Is Don's card. Okay.
Yep. There's one for you, Mike. Rangers cards.
Nice.
This is what you did back then. You
checked the checklist. Yeah.
Yeah. So these cards aren't worth a darn, but I'm like, they're not my brother's cards.
Do you remember trying to actively complete a set?
Back then, yeah, we did. And it's funny, like for us, the Pirates were the players to get. They were hard to get because everyone was looking through those CeeLo packs, looking for them. And just trade with the guys. And I was always jealous of this one kid down the street. His mom would buy him boxes of cards. So he had just tons of packs. And I was like, this kid sucks. Like, we get one pack every 2 weeks, and this kid's freaking getting boxes of them. But it's funny, the girls in the street would buy the cards, like, because it was different back then. Like, I look at my son, there's a kid lives across the street, same age as him. They don't hang out at all. We were all different ages. There was like a 5 or 6 year different span. We just hung out, and we all had cards, and we trade them and flip them. And
well, we have to fix something right now. You keep calling it a CeeLo pack. It's a Cello pack. It's not CeeLo Green, the rap artist. It's a Cello pack.
And it's Donruss, not Don Russ, right?
Yes. But
I've heard people say that.
But Cello like rhymes with Jello. So,
all right.
Look, man, I'm just trying to help you out.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll go
before
life with that. Thanks.
I don't want the comments to just start wailing on you. That would be not good.
All right.
So I could never afford CeeLo packs, just Cello packs back then. My mom back then, and this may have been true even in the late 70s, but cards were at 7-Eleven, at every nickel and dime store had cards. You could buy packs of cards pretty much everywhere that sold anything. And so I would always ask my mom for a pack,
right.
or 2 or 5 or whatever. And again, we came from relative, where money was not tight, but just being frivolous on sports cards seemed really dumb to my dad. And so my mom did the same thing. She would buy us packs, and we'd, take them to our room, and we'd open them up, and I would lay out all the cards by team. I would organize them by team for whatever reason. I wanted all the Rangers, just like you wanted all the Pirates. I think that's a very natural thing for any collector, that you collect your hometown team or your favorite team or whatever, which is funny because my mom's favorite team was the Yankees. And
that Bobby Richardson card she has.
Exactly. She was a Yankees fan, but that was because when she was growing up, the Rangers didn't exist. There was no team in Texas. And so you were either a Cardinals fan or a Yankees fan. And
is that because Mantle was from Oklahoma? Kind of close?
No, I think her dad was a Yankees fan. So it's very familial, right? I think
right.
You can definitely pass down a love for a team.
Absolutely.
Without any direct connection yourself, but if your parents loved them, or your grandpa always talked about this team or whatever, it's easy to also love that team. But the Rangers were around. Rangers were born in 1972. I was born in 1973. So I'm
pretty much grew up with the Rangers.
I grew up with the Rangers, and so getting Buddy Bell cards and Toby Harris and Jim Sundbergs and
Jeff Burroughs.
Jeff Burrow, all those guys. And I pretty much would collect packs. They would all get rubber banded by team typically, and thrown. I used shoe boxes were my storage.
Yeah, I did that. Right.
Which was terrible for the cards. And I didn't pull any out, but I guarantee you I still have cards that I bought in 1981, just like you do.
What's so amazing to me that some of these vintage cars from the 50s and you can even go into some of the Bowmans in the late 40s, that they're so nice that people thought to keep them in great shape. And I think sometimes we're so overcritical on cards, like, oh, the center's a little off. It's like, dude, it's from 1949.
Right.
And look how good it looks.
Yeah, totally. Go, get out. I'm on a streak of having my dogs be a total pain in my butt during video shoots.
You don't want to talk about pain in the butt dogs. I got this puppy. I don't know if you've seen him on any of my videos, but so that shows you don't watch my videos.
I do.
Apparently you don't.
Apparently I don't. We
have a 12-week-old golden retriever because we put our other one down in July. He's so cute and he's so freaking bad right now. It's like he's torturing our other dog. It's like navigating. He just doesn't pee in one spot. He walks through the house to pee. It's like, whose idea was this? Which it was mine. But my wife's like, well,
okay, back to formative years.
Yes.
So do you remember? So we both share, and I think again this was a common thing to have kind of that retail experience where you're going into a store and you're buying packs of cards.
Yes.
I too didn't buy boxes of cards. One thing that happened to me a lot, especially starting in the mid 80s, you were already out, so to speak, of the hobby, but yeah, dude, I remember I bought so many Slurpees just to get the coins at the bottom.
Okay.
It felt like Fleer was coming out with these little box sets like almost all the time, like star hitters and star this, star that, and all of that, star stickers, Fleer star stickers, which started in 81. I bought those like crazy because they were cheaper, and so I could get more. I didn't care anything other than what can I buy, what can I afford with my lunch money or whatever it is that I was using to buy cards back then. If it was a baseball card or baseball something, I wanted it. Were you the same way in the 70s?
With Hostess products.
Okay.
So yeah, we'd go into the grocery store and I'm flipping the back of Twinkies or Ho-Hos to see which player's on there. Absolutely. And Kellogg's cereal. God, it wasn't even just baseball cards. There was always prizes in cereal, and it was like, yeah, what prize is that? But I totally remember getting the Hostess boxes. And I didn't pull any of those out, but you should see some of the cut jobs I've done on those.
Yeah, I bet they're pretty crooked.
They're pretty bad.
I did the same with. I remember distinctly Kraft Macaroni and Cheese had cards. I want to say, I actually have a panel over here. Right here. I got it. This was in the basement collection. But these were on the back of a Kraft Macaroni and Cheese.
No, what year was that?
This was 87.
Okay.
Mike Schmidt, Don Mattingly.
Yeah, I definitely would not have been looking for those.
Like I got really good at cutting these out actually. And they're terrible cards. Like there's no logos,
Right.
But I'd do the same thing. I'd turn around the box on the shelf and, I don't have that guy or I don't have that tandem. And I would buy that box to try to complete the set or whatever. Even back then, I was always a completionist. Like I want to have all of them.
Yeah. So I remember for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You remember?
No. I was going to move on. So if you got something else to say,
So my brother's a year younger than me, and he was heavily involved with the cards as I was as a kid. And he hasn't looked at a baseball card in 40 years, I bet. And I know you're a twin, so you're obviously close in age. But was your brother into cards? And is he still? I know he was a baseball player as you were, but like my brother, like he just lost interest, and I didn't for some reason. Is it the same with you, or is he actively involved too?
He's not. I mean, he appreciates it. Like he watches my videos. He watches Chasing Cardboard. He thinks it's cool. And he was a Will Clark guy. I was a Darryl Strawberry guy as a kid. and he was Will Clark. So now we're dating ourselves. Now we're late 80s, right? So we're into high school, and I would always wanted to go to the card shops and buy cards. And I think he did it. He could only be the one to answer this, but I would guess he did it just to kind of play along. I don't know how much passion he had for it. And then as an adult, he's dabbled in it a little bit, like getting back in. He went to Vanderbilt, so he'll buy David Price and Dansby Swanson and, Vandy guys. But the reality is he's not, obviously it's not nearly close to me. He's actually going to the National with me next year. He's like, he watched some videos of this year's National, and he said, "You guys just look like you're having so much fun. Would it be okay? Like, would I cramp your style if I came to the National in Cleveland?" And I said, "No, it'd be." Oh, sorry. I didn't put my phone on Do Not Disturb. But he is coming to the National. I said, "You probably wouldn't want to be there more than a couple days. You'll get bored, But he's like, "Y'all are having so much fun. I want to be a part of that. I want to see that for myself."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Sure, come on. We'll have fun."
He absolutely will. I'm telling you, Mike, last year not going, and I just couldn't go. But it sucked. Like not so much people in the show, the cards. I didn't miss that so much, but just like your thing and the next one with crap, why am I drawing a blank?
Filmington?
No. Well, yeah, Filmington, but what's his name's normally there? The Yankee fan in New Jersey.
Silver Jackify?
Yeah.
He wasn't there this year either.
Oh, okay. But that part was tough. And there were so many new guys that I've talked to and I haven't met. I'm like, this is the hard part of watching this. I'm like, I'm jealous, but
well, you get to go next year. I know you're going next year.
Yeah, I'm already got my room.
You'll get to meet my brother. He's got his room. He bought his plane ticket. Like, he's coming. So,
well, that's cool.
But so let me ask you about your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Does he even know what you're doing? Like, does he know how your collection has evolved and grown? And does he even care? Does he ever come over and want to look at stuff and remember
Not
things?
really. It was funny because I showed one of my older brothers a room, and I have a few items from them when they were a kid. Like, I have this Pirates pennant from the 1960 World Series. And I'm like, "Tell me about this." And he's like, "I don't remember how we got it. We just always had it in our house." I'm like, really? Like, there's no story? So he knows, like, my brother was a huge Willie Stargell fan growing up. And a long time ago, I gave him an autograph. And I'm like, "You can keep this till the day you die, but you can never sell it." Where now I'm kind of like, you can sell it. Willie Stargell autographs are a dime a dozen. But I didn't know that back then.
There's your son.
Yeah. Come on. Nope. All right. Have fun. But
okay.
Yeah. So and he has 3 daughters, and so he's just. Although my son doesn't care either about cards, so.
So if you think back to us opening packs, we were obviously interested in the current players for our favorite teams and all that stuff. Do you remember like going to your first card shop and that experience and the feeling? Maybe not even the first one, but just those early experiences of going to the card shop?
I remember the very first vintage card I bought at a little card shop, because this is probably me getting back into it after I'd stopped around the late 80s, early 90s. And I didn't know anything about vintage, just what I had.
So wait, you didn't go to card shops in the late 70s?
There weren't any. No,
okay.
I couldn't drive. Like, I was only 12 years old, 13 years old. There weren't any card shops. And if there were, I didn't know about them, and my parents weren't driving me to them.
Okay.
So it was probably my early 20s, to be honest, the first time I went to a card shop. And I know the first card I bought was a 1960 Topps Bill Mazeroski. I paid $10 for it. It's probably a 2 or 3 if I were to have it graded. But
I went to this
other. What's that?
You still have it?
I do. Yep.
You should grade that just for giggles. Like,
yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that. Damn, Mike's coming up with a lot of good points tonight. But I remember going into this other card shop, and I was so overwhelmed. I was just like, I don't know what to buy. I don't know what player to get. I don't know anything about vintage. And I don't think I bought a card that day, because I just walked out. My head was spinning. This is pre-eBay, And then there was another card shop I used to go to. This guy was on my route. I used to be a pharmaceutical rep. And he would actually put cars on layaway for me.
Huh.
And every time I went up there, I'd give him a little bit of money. And I still have some of the cards I bought from him and got graded. And, that was my only way to get cards.
I don't think people, you go to a card shop today and it's pretty glitzy relative,
Right.
it's well lit. It's, everything's organized.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 80s, the card shops that I went to were gringy, dark, guys in, the dudes sitting back there smoking a cigar, smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, they were dumb.
Yeah. And everything, all the holders were yellowed even back then. Like they were already from either the cigarette smoke, and you would.
And I thought that was normal. I didn't think anything about it. I'm
like,
okay. My collection. I probably still have some of them down there if I looked hard enough. Yeah.
I mean, I remember all the boxes in this card shops would just be stacked along the wall. Not hobby boxes, but boxes of commons, boxes of cards, right?
Yeah.
Just sitting there being ready for somebody to look through and see what jewels they could find,
And then he'd pull out his Beckett, look at the price for it. Okay, there's a range.
Yeah. And Beckett was in its infancies, early 80s. I don't remember going to card shops probably till mid 80s would probably be when I started going to card shops, which
you actually went before me then, because it was late 80s for me.
Yeah. But it was still, there'd be the showcases and you'd see the vintage, and I think everybody loves vintage. It's just, can we afford vintage,
Right.
And I certainly couldn't at that time, but I remember seeing cards and longing for them, but going, okay, I'll take, a pack of 84 Donruss or 83 Tops or whatever. And, kind of resigning myself to only buying current stuff because I couldn't afford the vintage.
Yeah, but the junk wax card era came out. There were card shops everywhere.
Yeah.
Every corner was popping up with places. I still drive by today and I'm like, I remember there was a card shop that used to be in there. They were everywhere. So
I do that too. I could drive you just in Fort Worth to 6 or 7 locations where at one time there was a card shop.
Yep. Same here.
And I miss those days. Honestly, I mean, I miss, especially starting to get into the 90s when cards became super popular. This is kind of beyond my formative years, but still early enough in the process that I remember seeing autograph cards. And once the 90 Upper Deck Reggie Jackson came out, Chase the Reggie, and that, oh my gosh, you can get autograph cards this way, But before I get too deep down into the newer stuff, I say newer, past our formative years, the question I want to ask you is, during those formative years, I think, again, as I said in the beginning, we learned a lot just by kind of trial by fire. There weren't any cool resources like they have now to learn quickly. And so it took a long time to learn. Do you remember when you kind of knew what all the vintage sets were, like by sight? Or do you still have trouble with that even now?
I am good from 1947 up. I know those cards by sight, unless it's so rare. The pre-war, unless it's T205, T206, Cracker Jack, and I can't even tell you the difference between 15 and 16. No. All those caramel cards. And I showed a card on a video the other day, and I literally, read the flip. I'm like, that's the only reason I know what this card is. Because, I'm not like Dave or Mangini or, these vintage guys, Orlando. I just don't know that stuff. And I probably never will, to be honest.
But I can just say, I remember I was in easily my mid-20s, late 20s even, before you could quiz me and put a card in front of me of the major top sets, Donruss sets, right? That you could go, here's this card, what year is it? And
absolutely,
for the longest time, 66 and 67 would confuse me.
Yeah, I agree. They still do a little bit, but
there were definitely some years that I think that's around this. But by my mid-20s was when I would tell you
I still get confused on 51 and 52 Bowman.
Yeah.
To this day. Now. And I'm like, okay, the first one had the autographs, the second one you should know who they are.
Right.
That's how I have to. That in my mind, that's how I think of. But I still get confused on that. But what's funny is, and I was talking to John Wade, box fan, last night because we have a guest coming up for our next show. He was talking about the '78 Jim Cott that he really wants. In my mind, I instantly could see that card. Like, yep, Phillies profile, and I could tell you every scrub that played from '76 to probably '80 because of their cards. Where today, I'm like, I don't know anyone that plays for Tampa, or I know the star, but you could go through those sets, and especially like '76, you name a guy, I'm like, yep, I know what that card looks like.
That's an interesting point. I bet you, especially on the Hall of Famer, certainly not on the common guys, but you could go now and say 58 Topps Willie Mays. I can instantly picture. Yep, I can instantly picture that card.
Right.
And I can do that a lot now. Whereas when I was a kid in those formative years, I wouldn't have, again, been able to even tell you the year. I would, if I was guessing and got it right, maybe. But I always remember 1960 because it was horizontal, right? So that was easy to kind of burn into my brain as to, okay, if it's turned over, it's 1960. So that was pretty easy. But but now, tell me, say a card, and I would be able to tell you what it looks like, what the picture is, what.
Yeah, 62 Clemente.
Which year?
62 Clemente.
So it's about waist up shot. He's holding a bat.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Cut off
the thing maybe? I'm not good at, like, I know the fronts, the backs I do not. You could fool me. I'm putting some backs up. There's a few years I'll know, but yeah, you could get me.
I've actually gotten to the point where I know the backs now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of weird, but it's only because it just takes time, right? And experience, and the pre-war stuff, just like you, gets me a little, even I'll get confused. I remember on a video. Do people not know I'm recording? No.
Apparently not.
When I remember, even on a video recently with Chasing Cardboard, I was looking at a T207 and I called it a T205 or something. Like I knew what it was. I really did, because I have one of the cards. Like, I know what year it is in the moment, though.
That's one that has the brownish background, right?
Yep, brown background.
Yeah.
And so sometimes even in the moment with pre-wars, not really with normal vintage, but pre-war, man, I'll just be like, I'll blank, or misspeak. Not intentionally, not trying to mislead anyone or anything. I just goofed.
It's just, we didn't start out in pre-war. We're post-war guys.
Right.
So, we've kind of mastered that, and now we're dipping our toes in pre-war, where other guys, have been, enough said cards, Andrew, they've been dealing with that stuff forever. So they're experts on that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If we don't know it.
It's good to know people that do, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So we had we had retail experiences, then we had shop experiences. What about your first show? Do you remember your first card show?
Man,
I stumped you.
You did. I'm trying to think, because I didn't go to a lot of them. I think they were like mall shows, probably.
Okay. Yeah, probably.
Or small hotel shows in the area. Maybe 20 tables or so. Where I got a lot of cards. I worked for a guy who owned a card shop. So he used to hook me up with a lot of stuff, and it's, he'd pull this stuff out of the back room, and it was his side job. And we'd go to, the Rangers probably have it too. It's called Pirates Fest.
Mm-hmm. We have Fan Fest, Rangers.
Yeah, same thing. So he'd have a table set up down there, and I'd help him work it. I didn't have anything to sell. I'd just hang out with him. So those are probably, it wasn't anything like the National, or obviously, or, I didn't go to one until you pretty much strong-armed me to go. And I'm glad you did.
Best decision of your life. What are you kidding? Who are you kidding? I remember card shows for me in the late 80s, early 90s being kind of this once in a while experience. The mall shows, the like you said, the hotel shows were pretty common. I would go to those from time to time, but I remember going to a show with $20 and thinking, man, I can't wait to see what all I can buy.
Right.
Now it costs $20 just to get in the door. And back then it might be 50 cents or whatever admission back in the day. But I did go to the National in 1990, and I just remember it
back then.
What's that?
Was it in Texas in 1990?
Yeah, it was in Arlington. It was over by where the Rangers and Cowboys are. But back then, to me, it was just another show. I didn't, think, ooh, it's the National. I mean, I'm 16 years old at the time.
Right.
So I went with a buddy of mine, James, and his uncle, Jerry. And Jerry was actually, believe it or not, my buddy James and we've been friends forever. He collected Rickey Henderson back in the day. I was still on my Darryl Strawberry kick. This is right before I became a Juan Gonzalez guy. And I was looking for Darryl Strawberry cards all the time at any show I would go to. Because back then, like you said, there's no eBay. So if you couldn't find it at a show or a shop, you weren't going to find it. There was no look everywhere in the world and find anything you want at that time.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I would just buy multiple. I had, 500 1989 tops Darryl Strawberries, just because every time I'd see one, it would be a nickel and I'd buy it or whatever.
Right.
And that was probably silly. I still have all of those too. My Darryl Strawberry collection would be like a giant stack here. It's almost a 3,000 count box, believe it or not.
Really?
So
what I think is cool about your formative years, you talk about it a little bit, but not a lot, that your dad was a cameraman for the Rangers. So that gave you and your brother access to players or former players, and I think that's awesome. That had to have added to your love of baseball, being able to meet some of these people.
No question.
But did you have access to memorabilia or cards or anything? Or?
Not really, and it wasn't a big deal back then. Everybody's heard the stories of my dad taking cards and getting them signed by the likes of Killebrew and Rizzuto and guys like that. But those were not like everyday kind of things. I would go hang out in the clubhouse before the game, but to have memorabilia like that wasn't a big deal. So I didn't really consciously think about that. I was a kid, I was a teenager, so it was just cool to be there.
Were you able to go in the clubhouse and the dugout and stuff, or just up where your dad was? So
both.
Free reign, pretty much.
I had free reign. I knew Arlington Stadium this is pre Globe Life Field, the ballpark in Arlington, the old Arlington Stadium. Man, I knew that place like the back of my hand, and it smelled terrible. It always smelled like stale soda and popcorn and beer and but I knew
they were all chewing back then, probably.
Exactly. You could smoke in the stadium, I mean, just crazy stuff that we wouldn't even think about today. But I didn't think about the other parts of it. I just liked the experience, Go ahead. You talk for a minute.
Okay. So Mike's going to get me a new card that I can't wait for him to show me.
I wish. That'd be awesome.
But all you did was shut the door. That shut your dog on?
No.
That's pretty impressive.
It just makes it easier to not hear them.
Right. So I know your dad's been retired a long time, but are there still maybe guys that were young when he was finishing that are older now that are still with the Rangers, or his connections all gone pretty much?
That's pretty much all dried up. He'll go to the occasional reunion of the TV guys, but they're not there to talk about the sport. They're there to talk about their careers. He was good friends with Jim Sundberg.
Okay.
So, but if I see Sundberg, he still knows who I am. And hey, how's your dad? Which cool. Is really weird because I was a kid back then.
Right.
He kind of left. He wasn't a fan of the sports.
Yeah, that's what you said.
It made him a really good cameraman, but
how did he get involved in that? And I know we're getting off, but I just find that interesting.
So when the Rangers first started, he was a young, hardworking guy working at a local television station here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And he got the opportunity. Somebody said, hey, the Yankees are like back then, not every game was televised. Only occasionally the Yankees had pretty much every game televised, even on the road. So when the Yankees would come in, maybe the White Sox from Chicago, some bigger Boston, when they would come in, they would televise the games here. And so my dad started just by getting asked one day, hey, we need some local guys to come do this whole baseball thing. And he started it like in 72, 73. Like when the Rangers started, he was one of the first guys. And he did that all the way through the mid 90s. My big times of going with him were probably early 80s through 1990-ish. So I got to go. The Rangers were terrible, but I did get to go to 50 or so games a year,
right,
and kind of go wherever. So he just kind of grew into that, and eventually, the best camera to have is high home. There's cameras, back then there were 3 cameras. There was high home, a center field, which was usually way off center. Like it wasn't like it is now where it's more aligned with the pitcher. And then they had one of the bases. They had either a first base or a third base. And he started out as just basically kind of washing dishes, kind of work, and then worked his way to cameraman, and ultimately became the high home guy for this whole era. Like he would do every game high home. That's the one you have to be the most, you have to be on your game, because it goes to that shot so many. If you watch a broadcast of
when you say high home, is that on the catcher and the batter?
It's up in the booth with the announcers. It's called high home, and it's the shot looking down at the diamond. Every time a ball is hit, they go to high home.
I got you.
And either he's focusing on an outfielder about to catch a ball, an infielder fielding a ground ball, turning a double play, whatever. That was his shot. And so it was super critical to the flow of the game. So he would actually run camera like you have a viewfinder right in front of you, showing you what your camera is looking at. But he would actually watch the game with his head to the side. He would watch the game live and move the camera, because he would be watching more than what was just within his viewfinder.
So he got so good that he didn't even need the viewfinder.
Correct. He never even used
the camera and knew it was right.
That's right.
Did it for so long.
And he would be, because you not only are you pointing at the right thing, you have to focus it. Like this was pre-autofocus. Like you focused with a wheel on your hand, believe it or not. Your left and right hands were like holding like a yoke on a like you're riding a horse or something. You're holding 2 handles, moving this giant camera, and I'm sorry, I'm really getting in the weeds here too, but it was cool.
Fascinating.
It was cool to watch him work, because he would be standing like, face, head away from the viewfinder, headset on, listening to the director or whatever, and okay, ready to go to, and he'd be, on his shot, the director's barking orders and whose camera is going to be up. And I found it fascinating too, by the way, just like you do. And he was so good at it. Like he was asked to travel all over the country for big games, because everybody wanted Palmer to run high home.
Would he do non-Rangers games?
Yeah.
Like playoff games, the World Series games?
Absolutely. And then he did Mavericks, Cowboys. He traveled.
So he didn't just do baseball.
No, he did all sports. And I got to go to all of them. As a kid in basketball during the Mavericks, the 80s Mavericks with Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, they were really good. And I was the guy sitting under the goalpost during the games, holding a mic when you could hear their feet squeak, creak, creak. That was
a goalpost in a basketball game.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Goalpost?
I mean, sorry, basket. The goal, the basket. So I would sit under the basket and hold this microphone to get all those extra sounds that they wanted to add to the broadcast. So anyway, those were all formative years for me too. No question.
Absolutely.
Just not collecting formative years, more life experience formative years. Oh man. Well, we've just about run out of time.
I know, but see, that's awesome, Mike. Like I have cards. You got to see these players up close and be on the court or in the stadium or in the dugout. That's something that many of us never had the opportunity to do. So that's a great part of your formative years.
Yeah.
Fortunately, your dad did something like that, and you and your brother were able to take advantage of it. That's awesome.
I do recognize that I had a very blessed childhood that way.
Yeah.
And it was hard work too. It wasn't like we just I didn't just sit there.
Right.
I worked there too. I was a runner and doing other things, but
so what? How much fun would it be working there versus cutting grass or something?
Or flipping burgers or anything
Right.
that was a good childhood job, let me tell you. So Don, as always, man, I loved chatting with you. It's always so much fun just to shoot the bull and talk through stuff. This was a great topic, and I appreciate you being a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Don't wait another year to invite me.
Another year?
It's been almost a year, brother.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well,
that's all right. I know other people pass me up. No, man. I'm just with Mike. He's a good friend, and I'm always appreciate it when you invite me.
I love you, man. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching again this week. We'll be with you next week for another episode. Take care and keep collecting.